Welcome back to our second episode of For the Elevate. We're so glad you're joining us for another listen. And we look forward to your comments on what you hear in this next video conversation, so don't forget to add them in the comment section on YouTube. You know, we jokingly say in this episode that we are having a conversation about conversations. And actually, that's true. But we're also encouraging women to step out, step up, and speak up. Don't waste the opportunity to have meaningful conversations that can move you forward in your personal and professional lives. So here's Leanna to kick off this conversation.
It was our first episode. We had a whole discussion about new expectations, new assumptions, how we can't depend on our old assumptions anymore. And we talked about having the conversation about ways to move forward. I wanted to talk to both of you today about those conversations. We're going to have a conversation about conversations. The conversations that need to be had. I'm going to, for just a scenario, we'll go into nursing because we mentioned that in our last episode, but it applies to everything. And sometimes people have a really great idea. They have a new assumption, they have an idea how to fix it, but they don't feel empowered to talk to their leader or whomever might be the decision maker. Thoughts on that?
Well, we spend a lot of time with nursing, and nursing is what, 90% female. So we get into the whole female thing with that. But there's so many good ideas out there from people in the trenches who are doing the work every day. And we're always encouraging them to up their credibility by sharing their experiences, seeking out their leaders, and having conversations that are well thought out ahead of time to get their attention. But so often we hear my leader's not visible, never see him, it's hard to run into him. And there isn't really meaningful two-way communication. So, you know, our message to leaders is you got to get visible, be present, and be willing to hear what the experts in the trenches are experiencing and have to say about their work life. So yeah, that's a starting point.
I think one thing that we learned in the pandemic was, you know, people were so reactive, you know, in the very beginning, that they didn't have those conversations. But as time wore on, they realized those conversations were the lifeline. They needed to have them. And without them, you know, things didn't move. They became very stagnant, or as we were working our way through the pandemic, people would try to go back to old ways that just didn't work. So leaders really needed to step out, start having those conversations in healthcare, especially, you know, really sticking to rounding schedules, making sure that you're having those timely conversations and making themselves more vulnerable, showing people how they were feeling. You know, when leaders can be vulnerable to their staff, boy, that goes a long, long way in these conversations.
Yeah, it really does. It brings that human element in. Right. And I think sometimes, and correct me if I'm wrong, you get the direct report has hesitancy to go to their leader. They may feel that they're never around, or what's the point? It's not going to go anywhere anyway. And sometimes the person here is hesitant to go to their leader for the same reason. So it just seems to be this perpetuated problem. I mean, we all know that middle management or middle leaders, it's a really tough role to be in. But how do we encourage the person, regardless of level and regardless of their fear of not being received, get that oomph or that push to go and have the conversation anyway? Because obviously that's something that has to happen. That has to happen, right? It's a theme here.
Yeah, it does. And, you know, I think part of the way forward for that is to recognize what is working as well. You know, being an executive and going on rounds, it can be stressful and difficult when every place you walk into is like, gee, ain't it awful? So to get your leader's attention, always a great place to start is, I want to tell you about something that's working really well. And then I want to tell you about some issues we're having, and I've got some ideas on how to improve that. And I've really thought this through. I want to share this with you. I mean, that impresses me big
Yes.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think leaders especially need to, again, get back to how they react and get into conversations with the employees. They need to kind of go on a listening tour. You know, we often say listening is connecting, and that's so important. But it's not just about asking questions of your staff. It's really listening to what they have to say, and and actively listening. And a lot of times, the staff do have some amazing ideas. I mean, we see great innovations coming from staff all the time, especially in the nursing field. There's amazing innovations coming out of that field. They just need to have those questions asked of them and people listening.
Amen. I mean, how many times have we heard, why didn't they ask us?
Right.
It could be
All
as
the
simple
time.
as an office design. It doesn't matter what it is. I'm going back to the age old, why are there only 3 stalls in a women's bathroom? Everybody always says, well, it's because a guy built it, right? I mean, you're in a large auditorium. Why didn't they ask us? Like, why didn't anybody just ask us? That's a really good point. And Kathy, to your, I love that, because you hear all the time in employment throughout my entire career, I've heard, don't come to me with problems, come to me with solutions. And I think that is huge, that when you do go and have those conversations, that you're armed with some really cool ideas on how to fix it. Otherwise, it just gets to be we don't, we're not interested.
Yeah, that's a huge credibility issue. And when people do that, I mean, I'm telling you, I'm just always impressed. They've thought it through. They're really able to identify what isn't working, because often people will just spew out a bunch of stuff they don't like, but have difficulty saying, but this is what the real problem is that we need to solve. So man, start there. What is the problem you're trying to solve? And then if you actually went in and did some research around best practices, or did a little PDSA experiment, small test of change, and bring that forward, I mean, that is just really impressive work and communication that's going to get any leader's attention.
Yeah, completely.
I would agree. And it also avoids the swirl, right? I mean, there's so many times when you come in and you think, okay, I'm just going to sit down, I'm going to talk about this problem. And then all of a sudden you find yourself on overload, and you start dumping all your problems instead of staying really clear on that mission, on that problem, and being very articulate. That's really important. Practice with a friend before you go in to do that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to have the courage to go in and present this, but practice a couple of times with individuals. That's really helpful.
And what's the worst that can happen?
Right.
I mean, well, obviously things staying the same if it's a dysfunctional situation, but at least you've stepped over a threshold of pushing yourself out of a comfort zone. And regardless, that's a win, in my opinion.
I agree. I mean, take the risk. Our workplaces are really clunky and difficult, and I think everyone's looking for, how can we improve this? So at least it's the beginning of a conversation. And even if your idea doesn't go forward, you're at least presenting your thoughts on better ways, which shows you're engaged in what you're doing. I mean, I can't emphasize that enough. We need to take small actions to work our way out of our current situation.
Yeah, really good point. I'm going to throw one more question out to you, and then I think there's some good food for thought for a future episode on this topic. But what about team approach to a problem? Maybe even like creating a group of people who see that there's an issue, creating your own sort of committee or team outside of a formalized situation where everyone brainstorms about a solution and then you pick a spokesperson. Is that a good idea, or is that just?
I think it's fabulous.
Great idea.
So yeah, we keep saying we need to push leadership down in the organization, find the experts, You can't get all your answers from above. They don't know enough. We don't know enough. You've got to tap into that expertise. So taking the initiative and forming your own team and being solution oriented is a great way to go about this. I say go do.
Yeah, absolutely. Go do is great. And I think too, it also energizes yourself and your own personal team there. I mean, they get excited about it and they want you to be successful, and they as a team want to be successful. So I think that just gains that, it helps you build that momentum, it helps you build that courage to take it to the next step.
Yes.
And another place I've seen that work well is when people put in place like their morning huddle or their afternoon huddle. And that's an informal process where people are more comfortable speaking up and can share an idea or an insight. That's another great forum to go about this work and get your colleagues involved.
Great. And of course, not everybody in every situation, you're not necessarily going to have everybody on board, but odds are you got a few, and sometimes that's all it takes, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sometimes it
It's
just
amazing.
takes one.
Sometimes it just takes one.
Right.
You're absolutely right. But if you see an issue, I'm sure somebody else sees an issue too. So,
Oh, absolutely. And people are just waiting in the wings for somebody else to make that first move. They're all like, if they do it, that's great. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. So have courage, be bold, be fierce, I mean, step out of that comfort zone.
it's
Yeah,
a
so
sign of a
we-
future leader.
That's right.
We want to encourage people in the front lines to step out, step up, speak up. And we want to encourage people at the top to understand everything that comes up to you is filtered and then filtered and then filtered. And of course, you're not getting the real story. So how do you build into your routine ways to get the real story? And as Bridget said, go on a listening tour and really be curious about what's going on in the workplace.
Excellent. Great advice. I suggest that frontline people and leaders do it for the Elevate.
The Elevate.
Why not? All right. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks all. Thank you for investing a few minutes out of your very busy day with us. Maybe it was that perfect brain break. We certainly hope so. And please don't forget to leave us comments on this episode. Let us know what resonated with you. And of course, let us know what you would like to hear more about in future episodes. Until next time, keep moving towards a healthier you. Do it for the Elevate.